Today we are going to be marrying two wonderful things, French macarons and chocolate. I'll be guiding you through each step and sharing all my tips and tricks so you can become an expert at making French macarons. I'll also share some fun ways you can decorate your macarons to really set them apart. Welcome to Trisha Ray Baking School Chocolate Macaron episode. Now, if you are completely new to making French macarons, I want you to first watch our French macaron masterclass episode, which I will link below. It's a great beginner guide and will lay the foundation for you. But if this isn't your first macaron rodeo, let's jump in. Our chocolate macarons are broken up into two parts, the chocolate shell and the chocolate ganache filling. We are going to start with the ganache because it takes about 45 minutes to set up in the fridge before you can actually pipe it onto your macaron. So for the chocolate ganache, we are going to start with 6 ounces of quality chocolate chips. I recommend using 60 to 80% cocoa to give the ganache that dark chocolate flavor. Next, we are going to add 3/4 cup heavy cream to a medium saucepan. Once all of the heavy cream is in there, turn the burner on medium-low. Using a spatula, continuously swipe around the sides of the pan as well as stir to keep the cream from burning. Heavy cream has natural sugar in it, and sugar loves to burn at high temperatures, so do not walk away from your heavy cream while bringing it to a boil. Continue swiping and stirring until your heavy cream comes to a light simmer. This takes me about 3 to 4 minutes. I don't want to bring my cream to a roaring boil, but just hot enough to melt my chocolate chips. You'll know it's done when small bubbles begin to form on the sides of the pan. Once you've got to this point, turn the heat off and add your chocolate chips. Use your spatula to push the chocolate chips down so that they're all covered in the hot cream. Let the chocolate and cream sit for 5 minutes. After the 5 minutes have passed, mix with a whisk until your cream and chocolate mixture become one. If you still have a few bits of chocolate, no worries, they will eventually melt into the ganache. With the heat still off, add 1/4 cup room temperature butter. Now, I never remember to let my butter sit out at room temperature, so if you're anything like me, simply cube your butter and microwave it in increments of 10 seconds until it's soft. This took me about 30 seconds to bring to room temperature. Whisk the butter into the ganache. With only a few bits of unmelted butter remaining, turn your burner back onto the lowest heat setting and whisk until everything is melted and combined. This took me about 30 seconds as well. Once everything is combined and the ganache is pretty and shiny, turn the heat off and let it sit for about 15 minutes. Once the ganache has slightly cooled, we are going to transfer it to a bowl or Tupperware container to set and cool off in the fridge. Cover your ganache with plastic wrap and place the plastic against the ganache to make sure a film doesn't develop on top. Place in the fridge for about 30 to 45 minutes to set and become firm so you can pipe it. Now that our ganache is setting up, let's move on to our chocolate macaron shells. So with any macaron recipe, we are going to start with our egg whites. Our recipe calls for 102 grams of room temperature egg whites. Now to get our egg whites to room temperature, you can leave 3 whole eggs on the counter for an hour or more, or if you're anything like me and you usually forget this step, you can also bring your egg whites to room temperature by placing 3 large eggs in 2 cups of warm water for 5 minutes. You don't want this water to be hot, just warm. Remove the eggs from the water and dry really well. You don't want any unwanted water to join your egg whites, as this will keep your meringue from whipping up later in the recipe. Separate the whites from the yolks. I like to do this by slowly catching the yolks in my hand and letting the whites run through my fingers. If you do accidentally puncture the yolk, try to remove all of it, and if it's too mixed in, you do need to start over. Egg yolks are high in fat and will keep your egg whites from whipping up to stiff peaks. It's a bummer, but maybe just make yourself some scrambled eggs. Now I'm going to use my scale to ensure I have 102 grams. Most of the time, 3 eggs will get me to 102 grams, but in this instance, I'm actually a little short. I'm at 96 grams, so I'm going to add a little more from the whites of a 4th egg. Because I'm adding a very small amount, it's okay that my egg is not at room temperature. I'm just going to grab it out of the fridge, crack into a separate bowl, and add to my egg whites. This is actually a great example of why it's so important to use a scale when making macarons. This particular scale I've used for over 5 years now, and I'll link it in the description for you if you're looking for one. So once you have your egg whites measured out, set the bowl aside as we move on to the dry ingredients. In a large bowl and the scale zeroed out, add 102 grams of finely ground almond flour. Zero out the scale again and add 178 grams of powdered sugar. Next, we're going to add 18 grams of Dutch cocoa powder. And I'm actually going to measure my cocoa powder in a smaller separate bowl since it's a smaller amount and I really want to get a precise measurement. If you don't have Dutch cocoa powder, you can absolutely use natural cocoa powder, which is what you'll probably find at most grocery stores, but I personally prefer Dutch cocoa as it has a darker color and a more chocolatey flavor. If you're having a hard time finding Dutch cocoa powder, we've linked our favorite Dutch cocoa that you can actually buy online. Now that my cocoa is measured to 18 grams, I'm going to add it to my almond flour and powdered sugar. Next, I'm going to use my whisk to mix my dry ingredients. Once everything is mixed together, I'm going to sift the mixture. I actually like to use my whisk to move things around in the sifter. Once I get to the bottom of the mixture, I'll use the flat side of the spatula to push everything through. Now to ensure everything is really mixed and light, I'm going to sift through one more time. This time I'm going to throw away any large almond granules that remain. You should have a teaspoon or less. We don't want to get rid of any more than that. We're now going to set this aside and measure our sugar, which we will be adding to our egg whites. We will be adding 79 grams of granulated sugar. Once we have that, we are going to bring our egg whites back into the picture, insert the whisk attachment into the stand mixer, and secure our bowl. Now when it comes to mixing the egg whites into a meringue, we are going to gradually increase the speed of the mixer, starting on low and then working up. So let me give you a quick overview before we jump in. Start by mixing for 2 minutes at setting 4 or any medium-low setting. This is also when you add your granulated sugar. Next, we are going to mix for 2 minutes at setting 6 or any medium setting, 2 minutes at setting 8 or any medium-high setting, and last we are going to finish with 15 seconds at setting 10 or whatever your highest speed is. Now for my friends who are using a hand mixer, the mixing process will be very similar, but just a little bit longer in time. I have the timed amounts listed for you in the description of this video. All right, let's start mixing. Now the final step in creating the meringue is to mix on the highest speed for 15 seconds. However, this final step may not be necessary if your meringue is already at a stiff peak. Depending on your stand mixer brand, all stand mixers have different RPM settings, which can cause your meringue to whip up faster or a little slower. For me, my meringue always needs the additional 15 seconds to get that super stiff peak. With all that to say, I simply want you to check your meringue first, and if your peak stands completely straight, no need to add the 15 seconds. But if it's not super stiff and your peak is a little bit flimsy, add the extra mixing time. Now that we have our meringue nice and stiff, we are going to combine our almond flour mixture and our meringue by delicately folding them together. We are going to start by adding the dry ingredients all at once. Most macaron recipes will tell you to do this in batches, but I always want you to add the dry ingredients all at once so you can count your folds. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the technique of folding, a fold is simply when you swipe around the bowl and cut through the middle. Let me give you a quick example so you can see it in slow motion. So if using a stand mixer, I want you to count and aim for 58 to 63 folds. If using a hand mixer, I want you to aim for 47 to 52 folds. The point of counting your folds is to prevent overmixing or undermixing your batter, which I'd say is one of the biggest culprits in failed macaron attempts. Also, your fold count may be a little higher or a little lower than my suggested range, but once you find the perfect number based on batter consistency, write it down and stick to that count in the future. Now, once you start to creep up towards your fold count range, I want you to start testing your mixture using the figure 8 test. The figure 8 test consists of lifting the spatula and very slowly drawing a figure 8 shape without the ribbon of batter breaking. If the ribbon of batter does break before the figure eight is complete, the mixture is too thick. Add a few additional folds. As you are folding, make sure you use your spatula to dig up any dry ingredients that are hiding at the bottom of the bowl. I simply pause my counting and then proceed once I've brought everything up. Now my last piece of advice when it comes to folding, I promise, is to remember you can always add more folds to your batter, but you can't undo an overmixed or too runny batter. So begin testing your batter sooner than later. Now that our macaron batter is done, we are going to prep our piping bag. So what we want is a large piping bag, and to cut the tip about 3/4 inch from the top and insert a number 12 metal tip. I like to bend the tip of my bag upward when I put it in my cup so that we don't have any spilling going on. This allows us to use both hands to transfer our batter to our cup. Now I'm going to use this tiny little rubber band. You could also use a bag clip to seal my bag. Now we're ready to pipe. We are going to start by lining a half-sheet pan with parchment paper. Now I do prefer you to use parchment paper over a silicone baking mat because the thinness of the parchment paper will actually allow for better heat transfer to your macarons. Also, I want you to use a light metal pan over a dark metal pan just so we don't burn the bottom of our macarons. Now your parchment paper may not fit on the pan, and if so, simply trim the sides to fit. Our next step is to place our macaron template sheets side by side under our parchment paper. There is a link to a printable version of this exact template in the description below. Once your template is placed under your parchment paper, it's officially time for piping. Use your dominant hand to hold the bag, wrapping your thumb and index finger around the top where the bag is tied together, and use your non-dominant hand to help keep the bag in place. With your bag in hand, find the first circle to pipe into, starting in the very center of the circle outlined by the inner dot. Holding the bag upright, completely vertical, gently squeeze from the top and continue to squeeze until the inner circle is filled. Once your batter has reached the inner circle line, stop squeezing, swing the bag in a circular motion, and pull away. The tails of your macarons will eventually sink into themselves, so don't worry about those. Continue piping all 24 inner circles. If you want to practice before piping on your pan, you can do this on a napkin until you get the technique down. Once you have every macaron piped, place your piping bag back into your cup with the very end flipped up. We will use it to pipe more macarons in just a little. Next, we are going to remove our template sheets. Now, it's really important to always remove these template sheets before you put your pan in the oven because 1, it's a fire hazard, and 2, it'll actually block some of the heat that you need to let your macarons rise properly. Now, to eliminate any air bubbles within our macarons, we are going to firmly tap the baking sheet against our counter or table. I like to lift my baking pan about 6 to 12 inches up in the air and then drop the pan. I want you to do this 3 to 4 times. If any air bubbles are still visible, which is often the case, use a toothpick to pop them. No need to go crazy, we are just going to eliminate the visible ones. Now last on our list, we are going to let our macarons sit out at room temperature for 30 to 40 minutes. Aim for 40 minutes if you are using the convection setting on your oven. Letting your macarons sit at room temperature will allow a thin film to develop around the exterior so that the shells do not crack from the oven's heat. You can test if the macarons have sat out long enough and a film has developed by very gently touching the side of the macaron with your finger. The batter should not stick. While we wait for our macarons to set up, we are going to preheat our oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. I want you to bake them 16 to 18.5 minutes, rotating the pan halfway through. Large ovens will require more bake time, whereas smaller ovens will require less time. For larger ovens, aim closer to 18.5 minutes, and for smaller ovens, aim closer to 16 minutes. Chocolate macarons require a couple minutes longer of bake time compared to your traditional macaron. This extra bake time will ensure the insides of your macarons completely rise. Once your macs are done, remove the macarons from the oven. You're going to let them cool for at least 15 minutes, and then once they are cool to the touch, carefully detach each shell. Continue piping and baking the rest of your batter while your macarons cool. So now that we have all of our macarons baked, cooled, and detached, I'm going to match equal size macarons together, flat side up. Even though we used a template to pipe our macarons, you will still get some macarons that vary in size. Continue to match all the macarons and place them side by side for easy piping and sandwiching. Now we finally get to marry our ganache and our macaron shells. Remove the ganache from the fridge and check if it's firm enough for piping. If it's still too runny, you can always pop it in the freezer for a little and then recheck. Now if your ganache is too hard, which is often the case for me because I like to make my fillings the day before, you can simply place your ganache in the microwave for 10-second increments and stir well in between. Do this a few times until the ganache becomes a pipeable consistency. Just be careful not to overmelt the ganache because then you have to pop it back in the fridge or freezer and wait again. So once you have the right ganache consistency, place a number 12 metal tip into a small piping bag. With the very end of the bag cut, pull the tip all the way through so it's secure. Place the bag inside a tall glass or cup, just like before, and fold the top of the bag over the rim. Now transfer the ganache into the piping bag. Secure the top with a small rubber band or bag clip. Begin piping the ganache onto half of your shells and sandwiching with the other half. Your macarons may feel a little jiggly at first, but once they are refrigerated, the filling will harden and stick to the two shells, which brings us to the next step. We want to refrigerate our macarons for at least 24 hours before eating. And I know this feels like torture because you just created this baking masterpiece and have all these delicious macarons, but French macarons are not macarons until they set up in the fridge and get that slightly chewy texture. If you eat these right away, they will actually be a little too hard and a little too crunchy. Once they've spent enough time in the fridge, take them out and let them sit at room temperature for 15 to 20 minutes before eating. Now we could absolutely stop here, but if you really want to level up your chocolate macarons, I have a quick decorating tip that I think you'll like. I'm going to start by melting 1/3 cup chocolate. Use the same chocolate you used to make your ganache. Simply place the chocolate in a heat-proof bowl and microwave in increments of 15 seconds until the chocolate is fully melted. Next, I'm going to pour the chocolate into a small piping bag. You can also use a Ziploc bag if you don't have a piping bag. When it comes to drizzling and small details, I really like to use these tipless piping bags, which I'll link in the description. Tie or clip your piping bag and then cut the very tip of the bag. Make sure to cut this hole very small. With a good grip on your bag, begin drizzling the tops of your macarons in a zigzag pattern. You can practice this motion on a napkin first to get the hang of it. Now, if you like the salty-sweet combo, sprinkle a tiny pinch of sea salt over your macarons, which will stick to the chocolate when it dries. If you don't want to add salt, you can leave it as is, or you can substitute with sprinkles, crumbled nuts, or Oreo crumbs. All are great options. And there you have it, a full guide to chocolate macarons, filling to shell.